Hello, my fellow Westorians. How goes it on this fine Wednesday afternoon or evening, whatever you want to call it, whatever time of day it is, wherever you are? I hope you're doing well, and I hope you enjoyed Monday or Sunday's episode. I think that it was super popular around here. We loved it, and I think it's just doing crazy well with book readers in general. It was called A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, and it was in many ways a love letter to fans, in particular book readers, but a lot of show watchers, show-only people loved it as well. In tonight's episode, I hope we can craft our own love letter to that love letter. And Ashaya, we have some great minds to help on that topic with us today, don't we?
Yeah, we do. As always, we have Lady Gwyn of Radio Westeros, but we have another guest today. We have Joanna Robinson of Vanity Fair, A Storm of Spoilers, A Cast of Kings, still watching so much more. I don't know how she does it.
Yeah, your titles list of podcasts and things that you write is like Daenerys.
Yeah.
Well, hi, Joanna.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me to talk about my very favorite thing in the world. I appreciate it.
It lined up so well because we had you last season on at the end of the season to talk about Jaime going north. We called it The Kingslayer Goes North. And we arranged this time with you as soon as we saw that Jaime's trial thing would be a big part of this episode. And boy, that worked out really well because what an amazing episode that was. And we have so much to talk about. And this episode is very Jaime heavy, so it works out as a nice bookend to our previous discussion. Jaime wouldn't be so heavy if he had a different kind of metal on his hand. Gold is really heavy. He needs like tinfoil for his hand. That would also work with, well,
Someone mentioned that that Jaime should have a dragonglass hand so he could just like punch the White Walkers with his dragonglass hand.
Whoa, that's a really good idea.
Yes.
Should have had Gendry make that for him. He could have had his own blueprints for Gendry. Arya's everybody's bringing me their personal weapons. Like, come on. Despite this Jaime synchronicity of our prior episode with Joanna, this episode was a shared moment between a huge cast of characters. And if anyone stole the show, it wasn't Jaime, though he came close. I'd say it was Brienne. And they were both crucial in each other's biggest moments. And that's really cool. And we're grateful for that to the show and to Brian Cogman, who wrote this episode. And Joanna, you have interviewed Brian Cogman, so you have this extra insight to bring to the table indirectly through that interview. So that's really cool.
Yeah, I know that, I have been talking to him. He was nice enough to come on our Still Watching podcast a couple times this season, and I know that he's been really looking forward to everyone seeing this episode, that he was really excited that he got to do this one, because Brian's always been really good at those, people talking in rooms episodes, and so he was really excited to do this one, and he was like, I hope everyone likes it. He was really anxious, because I think, I think of it this way, there's two kinds of fans watching Game of Thrones right now. There's more than two kinds, but two major categories, which is the people who are here for the F yeah, dragons blowing stuff up, and then the people who really like the chewy character dialogue stuff. And this is definitely an episode for the latter. And just, that's us, I think. So really appreciate it. Yeah.
Definitely true. What about you, Lady Gwyn? What are your first, quick takes on the episode overall? Did you love it as much as I'm suggesting we all did, or am I speaking out of turn?
No, absolutely, I did. I think this was a great, as you said, love letter, not just to fans, but to the source material, because if anyone can write great characterization and the sort of thing that we saw in this episode, it's George R.R. Martin. So, in writing this episode, I feel like he really brought us back to the original source.
Yeah.
In a way that we haven't seen in a while, because it has been a lot of blowing things up and dragons and kind of that fuck yeah moment.
Yeah, there was I have a good name. Well, it's not my name. You hear that the term tits and dragons thrown around for the basics of the low, whatever you want to call the lowest common denominator of the fandom. I don't mean that to sound negative, but because people can like what they want. You're allowed to appreciate just the tits and dragons if you want, but clearly that is not what our show is about, and not what y'all, our guests, are about either. So we have a lot to talk about. It's going to be a lot of fun. And we have, speaking of gratitude for this episode and for Brian Cogman and the fandom in general, we have a couple of patrons to give quick shout outs to. Thanks to Jeff Gnarly, the long snapper, History of Westeros' first sword. Thanks also to our dragon riders, Talani Statalon, King of Gagossos, rider of Telarius, a red dragon with scales, horns, and talons of midnight black, and Robert IV of House Ardeacor, burned King of Blazewater Bay, rider of Atraxis, a black dragon with bioluminescent spots like smoldering embers and a banded blue tail. And I gotta tell you, that dragon looks more appropriate for Night King than Viserion. Someone had a better idea. So, let's see here. Let's get right into it. Let's start with Jaime and Brienne. On Monday, we talked, like half the planet did, about Brienne and about Jaime and how Brienne saved Jaime in the trial by vouching for his honor and how Jaime honored her with the thing she wanted most in life, though she never dared admit it. And if you think we saved this topic because you knew we'd have Joanna on today, you are correct. Because we talked about some of those individual moments, and even though they were very much tied into their own moments, we didn't really talk about Jaime and Brienne as a whole, as like not a couple, because they're not exactly a couple. But Joanna, please start us off with some Jaime and Brienne love, both from your end and from their end.
Yeah, I think something that I have been talking about in terms of why this feels so satisfying is because the Jaime and Brienne stuff is sourced from the beginning of the show when they just had so much more time to establish these connections between characters. I was looking at the air date of the first time Jaime and Brienne met on screen. It's May 2012, so that's
wow.
7 years in the making that this has been going on.
Wow.
And they had like a season and a half, 2 seasons almost, to just like be on the road together to form this connection. And so the story drove them apart, and we can talk about that a little bit since you guys are a book show. We can talk about how taking Lady Stoneheart out of the show really just sort of blew the Brienne and Jaime story up a bit. And then I think they sort of spun their wheels for a while until they could bring them back together here. And it's enormously satisfying to have them back together finally. I think Nicola Coster-Waldau and Gwendolyn Christie do some of their best work together. It's why they're like always paired in interviews. If you ever see a video interview, the two of them are together, even on the seasons where they like don't have any scenes together, because their chemistry is just incredible. And
to be fair, I think Gwendolyn Christie just has amazing chemistry with everyone.
Yeah, or is she not? Yeah,
that is a fact. That is a fact. But yeah, so I think those reasons that like it's an earned historical payoff, and we'll talk about this more later, I assume, but like Theon and Sansa feel similar, where it's just like you don't have to do that much heavy lifting in this episode to get there because they already did the work, for years on the show.
Good point. Lady Gwyn, let's get your thoughts on this.
Well, I have so many. It was hard to corral them all into
I know what you mean.
into a cohesive narrative here. But you mentioned Brienne's the thing she wants most in life, and I was particularly struck by that moment when she denied her dream. She said, I don't want to be a knight. That's what started it for me, to be honest. In this scene, if we're talking about this scene in particular. And of course, at the risk of stating the obvious, any knight can make a knight, coming from the Hedge Knight, which is, such a deep dive into the book material. And we're talking about writing a love letter to fans. I mean, geez, taking so much of this Dunk and Egg stuff into this episode was truly amazing, and it was the tip-off, I think, to what was about to happen in this scene.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you pointed out here, as some others have, that we have the reuniting of ice, the two halves of it. Do you guys think that anything is going to happen with that, or is it just kind of a nice little tidbit to notice?
I thought it was a nice callback to that defending Ned Stark's daughter with Ned Stark's own steel. And now here they both are actually doing that, defending both of his daughters and his house, his castle.
Arguably, Arya's defending them.
What about
Yeah, she wouldn't like to hear it put that way. But.
I've referred to it over the years as like the Westerosi version of the best friend necklace. Like they have two halves, like best friend necklace that they carry around, finally together. But also this idea that, the other thing that I really want, there's no time for it because the battle is upon us, but I really wanted Jaime to rebrand his sword because I think it's awful that his sword is called Widow's Wail. Like, don't you think he needs a new name for his sword?
Yeah, that's not appropriate anymore.
Maybe the battle will give it a new name.
Yeah.
Yes.
Barely survived. That'll be its new name.
Just made it.
Yeah. Phew! Your sword is called Phew? Yeah. It's also important to note that, just in this moment for Brienne, how important it is that it says a lot about who knighted you. Now, of course, Jaime is a controversial figure in Westeros. Some people think of him as a false knight, someone who betrayed his vows. But Brienne is not one of those people. She thinks he is honorable and was very honored to receive her knighthood from someone that was, just who he is. And that's pretty important. And Ashaya, you have you looked up some interesting facts about this scene as well.
I always like reading interviews in general about the show, and I thought it was interesting that Cogman pointed out that the title "A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms" definitely was meant to reference Jaime as well as Brienne, because Jaime finally is this knight that he has appeared to be his whole life, and now he really is finally living up to those standards, that sense of honor. So I liked that. I didn't really catch that, I suppose.
And Lady Gwyn, you have you pulled a quote here from the books that is super appropriate.
Yeah, I was when Jaime came to Brienne and asked if he could serve under her, I was reminded very strongly of the opinion that she thinks of him in A Feast for Crows, where she's remembering her fight with him from earlier on their way to King's Landing, and she thinks it had been all she could do to keep his blade at bay. He was weak from imprisonment, chained at the wrists. No knight in the Seven Kingdoms could have stood against him at his full strength, with no chains to hamper him. Jaime had done many wicked things, but the man could fight. And I just remembered back to that, and I watched her face when he came to her and said, I want to serve under you, and I could just think of her thinking this man could fight even without one of his hands. So she knew what a valuable thing that this was, even though he is maimed, and other people don't seem to value him as much as they might or should.
Yeah. Coster Waldau said about that as well. He was talking about when he brings that up to her, he said to Huffington Post that, the truth was that he wants to be close to you for many reasons, but first and foremost, you're the best. When it comes to fighting them, he wants to be close to the best when they face death. But also, to Brienne, like many reasons.
There's some strategy in that decision, yeah. A little hidden.
Yeah. He's no fool.
Yeah. I came to fight for the living, but I would rather fight with the best swordsman next to me. If I could have my druthers.
If you could pick one person at Winterfell right now to stand behind while they fought, I think I might pick Arya, but maybe Bran because she's taller.
Yeah.
One of those two is who I would stand behind if the dead were coming.
That's a line from the books, right? Bronn says, always follow a big man into battle, because he makes a big target. He's talking about the mountain.
Yeah, I'd choose Brienne. I'm 6 inches taller than Arya, I think.
Yeah, Arya is great to have with you, but maybe not. You can't be directly behind her, maybe. And with Bran mixed into all this, there's a lot of poignancy for Jaime as well. Such a huge part of this episode, which we'll get into in more detail a bit later, is people reliving their own lives or thinking about what they used to be, who they used to be, and all that. And it's the whole concept of ghosts, which we have Dancing with Ghosts. It's a wonderful theme for this episode. But just for this scene, Bran is Jaime's touchstone in a lot of ways. In fact, he says, "I'm not the man I used to be," directly to Bran, right after the trial, and he's aware that Brienne is a big part of the catalyst for his change. She was there for it, and she was there for all that, him getting his hand hacked off and the aftermath and everything that came until they were separated. So, Lady Gwyn, what do you think about the effects of Bran here as well?
I got a real strong sense of catharsis, really, where they came together, and Bran did indeed acknowledge that all this stuff had happened for a reason, that they had to go through these things in order to get to the place they're at now. I think that through the course of their scenes together, we see an entirely new meaning for the things we do for love, or the things I do for love. It's a phrase that really, to me, resonated throughout the whole episode. Jaime is preparing to serve under Brienne, and on some level, he's doing that out of his love for her. Their love is based on admiration, mutual respect, honor, what have you. It's a very specific type of love, but that's what it is. He's trusting to her, like we were just saying, to stand next to her as he faces his terrible enemy. And, it used to mean kind of a cutthroat family loyalty, but now it means giving up your life to save the living. It's really the whole inversion of the things we do for love, isn't it? And it really, I think, Bran forgiving Jaime, or at least releasing him from his sense of guilt over what's happened in the past, is a really nice setup to the Bran knighting Brienne and the scene.
Something that struck me was that how Jaime really, truly doesn't care about the opinions of the sheep anymore, while before he merely, as his father pointed out, wanted people to think he didn't care what others, because now he's going to be honorable, he's going to fight for the living, doesn't matter what other people say. Before it was he didn't care how they were insulting him and shaming him. But now it's a different sort of facet. What do you think about that, Joanna? What do you think about both the Bran stuff and Jaime's just sort of his changed attitude?
I have a quick question first. Is it kosher to talk about George R. R. Martin's original outline at the beginning of it? Okay.
Yeah,
yes.
That's fine. The only thing you don't want to talk about here are the next time on. Okay. At the end of the episode. That's it.
We shall not mention it. So I was watching some interview with Nicola Coster-Waldau where he was talking about how Jaime is such a juicy character, because to start with the character who starts with pushing a kid out of a tower, and then to try to build something up from there, as an actor, sympathy and empathy up from there, and stab Jory in the eye, and all the stuff that he does in season 1, to build a character up from there is a really fun challenge for an actor, I can imagine. And we know that in George's original outline, Jaime was going to be kind of the villain of the piece, and so I don't know if George originally started with this intention of having such a transformation, but it then feels more in keeping with what George is interested in, which is morally murky things, or messy redemptive arcs and all this sort of stuff. And Jaime, Jaime's my favorite character on Game of Thrones and in the books and all of that, just because it's so complicated and so fun to root for him, and okay to be disappointed in him when he falls short of the mark, and to keep wanting to root for him. And that's just a really satisfying feeling. And so the Bran stuff is all part of that, because it's all tied to that origin, and to be able to bring that back is really important to the end of this episode, when you see him sort of at the height of his healing process, away from Cersei, becoming the man that Brienne knows he can be. All of that sort of stuff is really enormously satisfying.
Yes, well said. So I'm going to put everybody on the spot here, and we're going to get a prediction. Also, y'all in the chat, feel free to do the same. Way in here. Does this happen in the books? Regardless of the circumstances, probably will be different, might not be, but will Jaime knight Brienne in the books? Lady Gwyn, we'll let you go first.
I think very possibly. I think that what we saw at the very beginning, that sort of trial, I figured was probably kind of their version of what we might see at the beginning of the Winds of Winter with Lady Stoneheart. at least in part. And following something like that, yeah, I could definitely see this happening. And I want to shout out, because I had this on my mind. I saw someone mentioned it in the chat, that you have, in addition to all of the other stuff, their relationship and stuff like that, you have the Dunk and Rohan Weber connection. So I think that they continue to have something very close in the books, so yes.
I think people know the Dunk connection to Brienne. It's been somewhat explained, but the Rohan Weber one, maybe we should pause for a second to back that up a little bit. Rohan Weber, of course, was a main character in The Sworn Sword, and Dunk had maybe some kind of relationship with her. And we find out later that after she marries Lord Osgray, or Sir Osgray, whatever, he dies, and then she eventually remarries to the Lannisters, and thus she is Tywin's grandmother.
Yeah.
Grandma.
So
she's
Jaime's great-grandmother. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it all comes full circle.
Oh, God, there's so much, it's almost incestuous.
Oh! Maybe not almost. So, Joanna, let's get your take. Do you think Jaime knights Brienne in the books?
Certainly could happen. I don't know. I think it feels like more of a cinematic moment to me than it does something on the page, if that makes sense. So I'm actually not sure that this is something George would write. It's not like he doesn't agree with the sentiment, but not even this exact thing. But I don't know. I'm not sure it would happen. No.
What do you think, Ashaya?
I think it's really interesting because in the interviews they've talked about how they specifically they wanted this moment to happen. Obviously, Cogman he got input. They didn't want it to be some cinematic moment on a hillside, like a dramatic.
Yeah.
thing,
So
right?
how to get
they really wanted to get it in there. So it does make me wonder what information they got from him if he says, "Oh, and eventually Jaime knights Brienne," or what they would have gotten. As it stands right now, it's a little hard for me to imagine it going that way, but there's a million things like that I can say that about.
Yeah.
I'm in A Song of Ice and Fire. I'm like, how are they going to get from point A to point E? And they do it.
I agree. So. It's true. Sometimes you have a hard time seeing how one plot point is going to get to another, but then you just sit back and go, wait, this is George R. R. Martin. He'll find a way. So I'll weigh in. I think I'm going to lean yes, and I think one of the main reasons for me is just the aspect of given the parallel to Dunk, the question of his knighthood is such a part of the Mystery Knight and the Sworn Sword and the Hedge Knight. So, and we feel like it's going to get resolved eventually because he joins the Kingsguard. So probably that's solved one way or the other. So I kind of feel like that'll happen for Brienne too. But I recognize that's not the most solid reason for a prediction, but it's something.
Yeah, it's a gut feeling.
Yeah.
Valid.
Okay, any more thoughts on Jaime Brienne? We'll be coming back to Jenny's song in the second half of the episode, but we'll be sticking with some of the other character moments first.
And for anyone who's been sending super chats, if you haven't noticed, we are doing a new format where we have a few different clusters of them. So we will get to it.
Yeah, we're going to do a bunch of questions at once rather than spacing them out. That keeps us more on topic. Yeah. Sandor Brienne, let's talk about that next. Even though they haven't interacted, I think there's some interesting potential and it's worth a discussion.
And it's worth talking about Sandor as well himself.
Yeah, that's true. There were perhaps fair complaints about a lack of Sandor-Sansa interaction. Frankly, I think it's not too late for that, especially because I'm of the mind that Sandor is going to survive because of Clegane Bowl is not unlikely. And
You're
Sansa,
always holding out hope. Forever.
You're holding on for Clegane Bowl.
Yeah. And Sansa,
like the mountain has to die somehow.
Yeah, and Sansa, I don't feel like is in all that likely
Can I
to
just
die.
ask a real quick question?
Yeah.
What about if the mountain gets turned into a white? What's the interaction there? That's just a thing I never considered.
I have thought about this too much because I've been wondering about the mountain and him being an undead being for a long time. But then it occurs to me if the Night King can just control the mountain, then can he control Beric and Jon?
Yeah, so
maybe.
About that.
but they're fire whites.
Yeah, that's what I was going to get to
but
next.
See,
like,
the Mountain
how does this
isn't
work?
really either. He's a weird, like, science white.
He's the
I don't
kyborg.
know.
Yeah, science white. Yeah.
Science white. I was about to say science white. Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, so it's up in the air.
Only Qyburn gets to boss the science whites around.
Okay, let's start with the digression, but I had to ask.
Yeah, so I feel like they could still have a Sansa Sandor moment later, because that would explain why they're saving it. Like, we have too many character moments fit in now, and since we know Sandor is going to still be alive, we can do this later. That could be,
I still just don't think there is as much significance between Sansa and Sandor in
No,
the show.
They don't have to have a big moment. They don't have to have anything.
They don't have to. Whereas, I feel like the Sandor Arya connection in the show was a lot.
It was more important.
More important.
Yeah, definitely, and more important to perhaps resolve sooner. But I want to compare this to what just happened with Brienne and think about all the potential it has. This is a guy that hates knighthood and thinks that people who, it's an unworthy, his brother was unworthy of it, and just the perfect opposite of what knighthood should be. And so that just made him sour on the whole thing. But Brienne is finally a good example of knighthood. I would think that maybe for him, that would be meaningful to say, hey, you know what? Finally, that's someone that's worthy of being a knight, And I don't know that it would be such a big deal that he would himself take knighthood, but if he did, it would be from her. So, Lady Gwyn, what do you think about that whole idea? Do you think there's any Brienne Sandor potential? And certainly feel free to weigh in on Sandor Sansa if you like as well.
Yeah, well, I think as far as Brienne and Sandor, I think there's just a huge correlation between the two. The two, they're both part of George's commentary on knighthood, and I put Jaime into that, into that category as well, and Barristan. But they're the two characters that say, "I'm no sir." They're kind of like anti-knights. I do think that if we can see Brienne achieve something like this, he would at least respect it. In the books, in the show, kind of all, across the board. I do not think that he would accept it for himself necessarily. Although you never know how they might frame it in the show. And as far as Sandor and Sansa, I think there's still definitely time in the show, because I do think there's unfinished business on both characters' parts with each other. Although, like you said, it's not as big of a deal in the show as it is in the books. But there's still, they've had minor reunions where this would be a little bit even more major than some of the ones they've shown. And so I'm with you that he has huge unfinished business with his brother, and that is going to come to pass.
Literally,
things
huge.
have happened in the show that pretty much seem to me to indicate that we're heading that way.
Right on.
So I think Sansa's going to survive. So I see them having some kind of connection at least.
Cool. Well, Joanna, what do you think about Brienne and Sandor and Sansa and all this business?
I mean, I don't think that it's a lovely idea. I don't think that they would do like another knighting ceremony this season, because it feels like they did it. It's beautiful. To do it again would sort of cheapen it. But that being said, like, I hope that they interact in the fight. And something that this is some weird calculus, because I don't know necessarily who's going to survive the Battle of Winterfell and stuff like that, but some thing that I do in terms of like show storytelling is like, okay, if they've had big emotional moments already, maybe we're gonna say goodbye to them next week.
Yeah.
And then if we haven't heard them utter more than 2 lines, like say Varys, then maybe we've got more time with them. They're saving those people for after the battle, because like maybe, because like you can't send Varys out with like 1 line of dialogue.
I want Varys to win, but I still also wonder if he will get those emotional moments in the crypts, during the battle next episode. But based on Melisandre's words, I think he's safe for a little bit.
For a little bit.
Yeah. So, be really worried about your faves that have had some big meaty stuff in these first 2 episodes, and feel more secure in the folks that you feel like maybe should have more to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like Lord Commander Ed Tullart, be prepared to say goodbye to, something like that. Versus, I think the Hound has much more to do narratively. So.
I think that's a good way to think about it, like a good process for figuring things out. I definitely, I think that is going to work for most of the time.
Not all the time.
Yeah. And Shay, you noticed that the way Brian Cogman refers to Sandor.
Yeah, in these interviews, I don't know, like you think of that, the iconic Jaime. His name is Jaime, not the Kingslayer. And in all these interviews, Cogman, the writer, he calls Sandor Clegane the Hound, and I don't know, don't love it. I think it's indicative of maybe where their head is at with Sandor, that they haven't really shown his change. I don't know if that's just a mistake or what, but I don't like it when I see Sandor called the Hound at this point, just like I wouldn't want to see Jaime called the Kingslayer.
Yeah, you're right. He's not the Hound anymore. You're right. That is not.
It was shown in the opening episode when he enters Winterfell without his Hound helm on, as compared to in season 1, episode 1.
When it's the first thing you see.
So I feel like they are wanting to hit that point, but I don't know.
That's a good point.
And I did like this interaction. Like, I was actually kind of salty about the initial meeting with Arya in episode 1, where he's like, "You're still a cold little bitch," or whatever. I didn't enjoy it at all. And I actually told Brian Cogman that. I was like, I didn't like it. He's like, "You'll like episode 2 better," and I liked it better. I was like, he's like, "There's more Arya and Hound stuff, and then it'll be better," and it was better. But I still feel like we want more for Sandor. I'm just gonna call him Sandor now. I'm not gonna make a Shea mad. Sandor forever.
The Hound is dead. Sandor is at rest.
Yeah.
I think that scene, I felt like it was better, but they missed when Arya said, "I've changed," and maybe they delivered it sort of, silently. He's a silent man. Maybe, his facial expression to me said, "I've changed too," but I wish he had said it out loud. That was my biggest disappointment, honestly, in the episode, was that he did not say, "Well, I've changed too."
I guess he said, I worked for, I fought for you," which is kind of like,
for you.
That's kind of like saying I changed, because before he wouldn't have done that. Maybe.
Yeah.
He's also, not exactly the most talkative guy.
No, he's not a Renaissance man. I mean, he's not really in touch with his inner self, probably.
No,
so
he's not.
It's hard for him. But
I think it's funny that the way he talked to Beric is like, he's warming up to you. He talked about throwing you off a wall and telling you to shut up. It's a compliment coming from him.
He was cute, and then they shared some wine. It was adorable.
If Sandra lets you drink with him, you're in.
Yeah.
Two miserable old shits.
Yeah, she was right.
That was funny.
Okay, so we've talked about Sandor, and I think we agree it's not that likely he gets knighted. But what about Podrick? There's a chance there, right? A chance Podrick gets knighted? I'm
going to say the same thing I said to you before, and I feel even more strongly now that I think more about Joanna's point about the time and whether they really, how much emotional resonance they get out of knighting someone again, which is Podrick Payne is going to have no trouble being knighted if he survives. Like, he's a man and of a house. Like, anyone will knight him. He fought in this battle. No worries for Podrick. So I don't think it's likely. I'll let them weigh in, but
also I put Pod right at the top of my Deadpool with Ed, because you get a lovely emotional song, and I'm worried about you. So
yeah.
Whereas I want Pod to survive and become a songwriter and just write the song of Ice and Fire for everyone.
Yeah, he can write the song.
He'll write these songs.
I write the songs that make the young girls cry.
Or return your money at the brothel. I write the songs at the
right. Someone in your chat, Pablo, mentioned just now, perhaps Beric will bring Sandor back to.
And I think we're good. I just wanted to. I think we caught that really early. Okay, it's back. We should be back and live. Everyone should tell.
Yeah, he says, I was just getting a shout out, Pablo says.
I was just kidding. So we clearly know that you were at Pablo's point about Beric.
Yeah,
so
let's
that's
roll
all
that.
that we missed.
Yes, it was a good point, so please restate that, please.
Oh, yeah, happily. Okay, so yeah, Pablo was just saying that perhaps Beric might resurrect the Hound, and I was just saying that this is something that someone brought up to me recently. It was like, will Beric sacrifice himself to resurrect someone the way that he does in the books? And on the one hand, I don't know that it's likely because the show has never talked about that as a possibility. And so I think that show watchers only would be disoriented if all of a sudden, like, Beric sacrificed himself to bring someone back and they're like, wait, are those in the rules? I didn't know that he could do that. I thought he could just light his sword on fire by thinking about it. And so I don't know that will actually happen, but it was just like a fun lingering book thing that I was like, oh yeah, it could happen, maybe.
I did wonder that because, I mean, when Sandor brings up the whole why did he bring you back 19 times, it made me think, I'm like, well, what has Beric done? What has he been essential to? Maybe they couldn't have done that Beyond the Wall excursion without him. Maybe he's served his duty so far, or maybe there's something else coming up that he's going to do that his sacrifice will be particularly important for. So I was thinking about that. That's a good point.
And if you rewatch 7... end of 6 and 7, he says so much to the Hound about, like, there's a reason we're still here.
Yeah.
We have unfinished business. And so I would not at all be surprised if the two of them do something in the battle next week or something that will fulfill that sort of, we have specific unfinished business, just the two of us, or, you know, something like that.
It would be kind of a neat full circle kind of thing that wouldn't be possible in the books because obviously Beric is long gone in the books. But if Beric resurrects Sandor, that would be a neat footnote to Sandor killing Beric and being raised by Thoros.
It'd be extra. It's just really funny to me in general, just because of the idea of both Gregor and Sandor being raised from the dead. It's just extra funny, but I still don't know how likely I think it is. But
well, it would also be maybe maybe a little sop to book readers since we didn't get Lady Stoneheart. You know,
yeah.
What is I like what you were saying before. What is Beric's purpose, anyways? Right. Has he done anything that someone else couldn't have done? And I think no, unless he gives that final.
Did you see that the interview that he gave to Kim Renfro of Business Insider, where he was Kim asked the best red carpet questions, and she was basically like, "Okay, so how does the sword fire magic work now? Since it used to be like a blood right and a whole thing." And he's like, you just say these two words in like Valyrian or something like that. She's like, okay, cool. Sure.
So we should be able to do this at home, right?
Right. Tell your friends. Everyone can light a fire sword, apparently.
Regarding the knighting, before we move on, if we're thinking of our Brienne Sir Duncan parallels, well, Duncan was supposedly, not really, he lies. He says Sir Alan knighted me before he died. So that's one reason to think maybe, you know, Brienne could knight somebody on her deathbed, but I don't think it's super likely, but we're throwing out
do you
there.
have a deathbed for Brienne? Looks like that term in particular.
You can have deathbeds while she's dying slowly.
No.
Yeah. Doesn't seem like those kind of that would work out too well, but it's possible. All right, let's tackle our first set of questions here. Strange TV says, keep up the great work, guys. See you at Ice and Fire Con. Yes, we will. We'll be there tomorrow.
Yeah, I know. We leave like noon tomorrow. And we get to watch this episode with Lady Gwyn and a whole bunch of people. Amazing.
Yay. From Nathan Morton, will Brienne Knight pod? Well,
we covered that.
Covered that already.
That's the great thing about bundling these super chats.
Yeah. And Princess Scania says it's also a descendant of Rohan Weber, knighting a descendant of Dunk. Yep, that's very true. Good catch. We did mention that. George R. Martin mentioned in an interview that Jaime could beat Aragorn in a fight. Do you think the show is underplaying Jaime's abilities? Well, we didn't get a lot of Jaime's fighting before he lost his hand. He certainly looked good as a warrior, but it wasn't put to the test a whole lot. But
I thought it was really funny in the show when they brought up, they're like, lost the Siege of Pike and, lost the Whispering Wood. And just like his exploits loser. Actually weren't very, very nice compared to some of the other ones.
Yeah. Karen Sita says, smash that like button. Yes, please, smash that like button. Kraken Tacos says, what do you think about the Night King pulling a Whispering Woods deception? The Dead March on Winterfell while the Night King heads for the King Landing or the God's Eye. Oh boy, have I been talking about this a lot on Twitter the last 24 hours. Oh man, I missed out on... I almost didn't fully prepare for this episode. I was too distracted by thinking about that topic and tweeting about it and posting it on Facebook. So yeah, I'm with you there. It fits so many things. I'm going to try to contain myself to not talk about it too much right now because it's a huge topic that I'm trying to work on.
I can record you with the practice with the new gimbal where Ice and Fire come. I'll just like get like a one-on-one of you just going off.
I'm going to talk to Emmett there too. Talk to Emmett about
last
some
night.
of this stuff.
I'm trying to get ready for all my panels and like this recording, and Aziz is just like laying it on me, and I'm like, I can't right now. I can't with this theory.
But it makes so much sense just to parallel. Not only does it have Rob's Whispering Woods deception, but it's also exactly what's described in the Dance of the Dragons when Aemond One Eye, who happens to have a sapphire eye and flies around on a dragon by himself, splits from the army with Criston Cole, while Criston Cole marches south through the Riverlands and ends up marching through an array of corpses, which, hey, that's a clue. And then Aemon, meanwhile, just attacks the Riverlands wherever he can. No one can find him. No one can stop him. Meanwhile, while this one dragon is flying around, rampaging wherever he wants to go, two other dragon riders happen to be chasing him, Daemon and Nettles. And, well, doesn't that sound like Jon and Dany in this scenario? So, yeah.
So, I have a question about this theory.
Yeah.
In this theory, do you feel like the Night King goes and decimates King's Landing while the Battle of Winterfell is happening? Like, how much damage does he do? Because narratively, from a show point, I agree with you about all the book stuff, but from a show point of view, if you have a 6-episode season, and the Night King splits off and let's say decimates King's Landing, that's the King's Landing plot done?
Well,
like somewhat off screen? Like how does that work narrative?
Well, okay, so first of all, let me connect some other dots to give it a little more weight, which is one, we have Dany's vision of King's Landing being devastated. So that fits really well with this. Second of all, we have Bran's vision of a dragon shadow over King's Landing, which people thought maybe is in the past, maybe in the future, we don't know. But obviously, if we're considering it as a possibility of a vision of the future, it fits super well here. I don't know exactly how Night King would ravage King's Landing, but the idea, a couple of things that make so much sense. Why would he want to we know Bran said he wasn't going to put himself at risk. Why would he just attack this spot that's the most prepared to face him when literally everywhere else in Westeros is completely unprepared to face him?
I will say, by the way, in terms of like wiping out human memory, go to the Citadel, dude. We've seen it in the show, but whatever. I don't expect that to happen, but like,
it
is part of my thought. There is like, if that is one of his goals, then
and that fits really well with the theory because Euron is the role of Night King in the books, because Night King is this eldritch figure riding a dragon doing magical stuff, and the show Euron isn't doing any of that. But book Euron is doing all the same things Night King is doing, or at least has been foreshadowed to do. So the idea of he rides a dragon, the idea that he takes down the wall, the idea that he takes out Old Town, which is human memories, is all already set up quite well. It's just right there. Like Euron's at Old Town, quite possibly getting ready to destroy it. So that would be the same kind of concept of him destroying human memory. And then
this is the first time that I've heard this theory that I've actually liked parts of it. I don't like the idea that the Night King attacks King's Landing, because I feel like he would just knock King's Landing out, and then where does our story go? Where does our narrative with Cersei go, and all of that sort of thing? Well, but if the Night King is out there knocking out other places on the map that we're aware of, like the Citadel or other places in Westeros, if we see Edmure Tully being like, "Oh no," and then
that's his one moment.
That works for me, but I don't. So him going off and doing something else does make sense. Obviously, I think King's Landing is going to be under threat of dragon or dragonfire at some point this season. Just pacing wise, it feels like it doesn't make sense for me here. It makes sense that that's a final thing, but to do damage elsewhere on the map, that makes some sense to me. That's interesting. Yeah,
right. And then, so if you take all this, basically, you're right. It fits a lot better for the books, but I think that some of these elements will make the show, and they fit so well.
Part of this is trying to see what are they doing in the show that can be translated to the books that could tell us something, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And just going back to the Dance of the Dragons, we have this moment where Aemond is, he has his final showdown with Daemon, and they've Daemon jumps off his dragon and stabs Aemon through the eye. Well, just imagine Jon doing that to Euron. And Nettles is the fire witch afterwards. Well, that you can see how that might be a parallel to Dany. And you also have Dany and Nettles, or Nettles and Jon, or Nettles and Daemon rather, kind of having to split apart. It would be for different reasons in the books. But another thing that lines up super well is the notion of Euron and Cersei. Because Euron and Cersei in the show is throwing some people for a loop like, that's not going to happen in the books. I've been suspicious that it would for a long time, ever since The Forsaken. And this just makes me more certain because we have Cersei just being pregnant right now, which lines up exactly with Aemond One Eye getting Alice Rivers pregnant. And then Alice Rivers being this witch queen character, which if we're thinking Cersei could be Stoneheart in the show somehow, which lines up really well also because, Cersei is this figure who's lost all her kids.
Cersei is Stoneheart in the show. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Cersei could be Stoneheart in the show. So that's a thing that could happen if Cersei is killed by Night King or becomes Night Queen. It fits super well because of her arc. Like her character arc is this woman who grew up knowing her kids were going to die. So she's traumatized by that. Then her kids did die. And then her family, betrays her, quote unquote. And so here comes Night King with this offer. Hey, guess what I have? I have an unlimited supply of immortal babies.
Yeah.
And they won't ever turn on you.
Somewhere along the way there, for sure.
Yeah.
I gotta say.
Well, that's where it gets to be more book.
It's more book. We gotta,
Here's another show-based reason or interview-based reason why I think the Night King has to show up at Winterfell, and it's because Vladimir Furtick, who plays the Night King, has said that he's going to have a moment with Jon Snow that's like the end of Hardhome, but times a million or something like that.
Oh.
He didn't say it's at the Battle of Winterfell, but like kind of. So for me, I've been expecting that the Battle of Winterfell ends, or at some point, the Battle of Winterfell, we see all of our faves die, and then we saw all of our faves resurrected as whites, as this double emotional punch, and then see our surviving faves have to kill our undead faves again. And all like I don't think the show as it exists right now in terms of like what it enjoys in terms of surprise, gut punches, spectacle, blah, blah, can resist the idea of the fallen faves at Winterfell. Let's say it's like Ed and Pod and Jorah or something like that. Us having to watch them get resurrected, and then us having to watch the people that care about them have to then kill them again. Don't you think that that's something that the show can't resist? And
so that's going to happen. Yeah.
That's
going to happen.
That's why I think the Night King has to be, maybe not initially, because initially we just see that line of White Walkers, right? And so maybe not initially, but I think he's got to show up to do this really nasty, dirty trick to Jon Snow and make Jon and like a zombie ghost or whatever it is, whatever your worst nightmare is, that's what the show wants to do to you. So.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. And you make good points about maybe they don't have time for this or the narrative, but we've been surprised by that before. I've backed off on they don't have time for that type theories because they find ways to do really short versions of things.
That's true. That's true.
I don't know. That's just that counter argument has failed me enough times that I don't use it as much anymore.
Some things are shortened that you thought would be longer, and the thing you thought might be shorter is longer. So it is true. So we will find out very shortly, though. Only a few weeks.
Yeah, and the other thing is this cleans up nicely is that how are these things going to happen in the books? There's no Night King in the book, so the idea that Euron does a lot of these things just fits so perfectly because, well, who else is going to do them? Who else is going to ride a dragon? Is there going to be an undead dragon in the books? Well, if so, then that's different. Then, Euron doesn't have to ride an undead dragon. But anyway, that's a whole lot of business to
our longest super chat answer ever.
Yeah, that's quite a long one.
Sorry, Aziz started that by being like, I'll be brief. And I was like, I have a lot of follow-up questions.
Yeah, it's not all my fault.
No.
Okay, so super chat from Janelle Peoples. He says, I love Indie Geek's theory on the Crypts / Horn of Winter. I will be so disappointed if they have Night King walk in and wake the Stark dead to fight for him. You'd think the Stark buried the dead with a purpose, knowing the White Walkers or the others. I made the same point in our Crypts of Winterfell video. It's like, this is the one people that should know to burn their dead. Everyone else in Westeros, no one else has crypts. The river, the Tullys throw them in a river. Everybody has, the Targaryens burn them. It's like, this is the one house that should know not to store their dead. But so yeah, what do you guys think about the Crypts thing? I'm iffy. I don't think the idea of the dead kind of rising is a little iffy for a lot of reasons, but something's got to happen there.
See, one of the things I feel like we've long felt like something has to happen there, and we have seen like bone skeleton whites, but they also went over very poorly. They also went over very poorly.
You mean the ones that stabbed Jojen?
Yes, those ones. So like, and I feel like HBO knows that the people didn't like the skeleton whites, so I don't know that they want to repeat that.
You need you need meat on the bones.
Yeah.
Right? That's why my favorite, okay, so like I have a lot of crypt resurrection theories.
Okay.
One is that the number one thing that I hate is a resurrected Ned Stark.
Oh,
because A, he has no head, B, they boiled his bones. So like,
no way.
if it's just like a pile of headless bones chasing people, like that has no emotional impact. And there's like no one down there that's meaty enough for it to matter, except maybe Rickon, because they took him down there like at the end of Battle of the Bastards. Like they just said lay him in the crypt. So like maybe Rickon still has some like flesh on them bones. There's no reason Littlefinger should be down there, and they haven't even talked about him this season, so I'm pretty sure they burnt him. So like I just don't think that there's it might be disturbing and upsetting to see the Crypts of Winterfell, which is like named a safe place over and over and over again in this last episode, be a house of horrors for people. Once again, it's kind of the kind of cheapish trick that I'm not sure the show can avoid, but I don't know that it'll be emotionally satisfying to see those Starks, because they're all going to be decomposed. We know hardly any of them, the zombie Catelyn, it's not.
No. Yeah, I feel like Rickon's the best bet for that. I don't know how incredibly imposing he is.
Just one kid,
one child.
Yeah.
Tila will take him out.
It would be terrifying for Arya. And so if you think about that scene of Arya looking terrifying, remember that she was never reunited with him, so for her to suddenly see him in that way, that would be...
Yeah, but she won't recognize him. She's like, who are you? You're 4 feet taller than my brother? I don't really know who you are.
My brother was only...
I was like kind of riding the Rickon theory until this last episode when they haven't mentioned him at all. Nobody has mentioned Rickon this season. And I feel like the show would have reminded... I mean, they took time to mention Gren and Pip, but not Rickon.
Right. So no one ever says, whatever happened to Rickon?
Yeah, so I don't think so.
If there's like if in the like previously on, Rickon's just in the previously on, I'd be like, well.
Okay.
Exactly.
It's like when they put Benjen in the previous season.
Yeah, it was like he hadn't appeared in seasons, and it was suddenly previously on. Like,
Remember this kid?
Yeah, that's a bit of a spoiler. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think it's which just makes it all a bit more puzzling. Like because I agree with you. I don't think there's going to be dead rising in the crypts, but I think something will happen. But I don't know what. I don't have a lot of solid guesses. It'd be funny if what's her name? The little girl, the Shireen stand-in, Tila. If she, well, not funny, but horrifying, really. If say Gilly had to like kill her after she was resurrected, like a Carsey moment where
it was a Carsey. I felt a real Carsey vibe from that, and I was struck by all the times that they mentioned people. You're going to be down in the crypts. Oh, Tila, whatever, that little girl, you can go protect the people in the crypts. Oh, Sam, you could also protect people in the crypts. What are we protecting people from? But I definitely got a sense of menace. So, but it's.
I guess if we're keeping it really simple, what could happen? They just, if Winterfell's overwhelmed and they need to flee, then that's not a good place to be.
Right. Yeah, it's easy to get trapped in there.
The idea of raising the dead out of the Crypts of Winterfell is compelling. I just am stuck on what Ashaya said, which is that the skeletal whites don't look good.
They look silly. Yeah.
They look silly.
And HBO, they survey people. They know that and they see the reviews. They know it was not popular. So yeah, there's that. There's a lot of people in the chat and in general who have wondered about some high magic statues fighting, which has been an idea in general. I'm down on that idea, Potter. But it's like Harry Potter. But I don't think anyone has any other thoughts. But that is a thing I've seen in the chat a few times already now.
Sam H says, shout out from New Zealand. Love the show. Thank you, Sam. Richard Sigmund says, Theon and Sansa have already hooked up in book. Really? Have they? I don't think so.
So.
I would be interested to hear why you think that. Chris Trombley says, battle beneath, battle above. Will we see a battle in the middle of the God's Eye? Joke aside, what are the chances we see a third dragon battle at the God's Eye?
Slim to none in the show, I think.
Probably not in the show, yeah. I think I like, by the way, one of the things that I didn't mention that I liked about all that theory ranting I had was tying it to Lady Gwyn's mention that Harrenhal will be Winterfell in the book, so that's where people will make their stand. It makes a lot of sense because it's by the God's Eye because it's so big and it can fit everybody. Also, it would
makes sense to have the last stand a little more south than up there.
After the others have already done so much damage, and we've seen starvation and disease and all sorts of mass dyings, and then the humans start to get to fight back a little bit. LML says XOXO. I predict Bran and Night King will carry the battle over the astral plane, and even if both seem to die, they will continue to fight there. Yeah, I've seen a lot of related theories like that maybe Bran will have to trap Night King inside the werewood net.
It's getting all very Legion.
Yeah.
We're like Doctor Strange.
Similar, same universe. Yeah. That makes perfect sense. Yeah. Vampirus99 says, What's your boggart white?
Yes.
Is that a
Harry
Potter
thing?
thing?
It's a Harry Potter thing.
Okay, well, I don't know. So you guys go.
Basically, it's this creature, a magical creature that when you open it, when you open like a cupboard or something and you see it, it shows you what you're most afraid of. So basically, this person is asking, what character would you be most afraid of or most upset by seeing? It could be fear. It could be sad. You could interpret it a few ways.
An undead banana.
You say bananas. Okay.
No, I would go with
characters.
You go ahead.
Go ahead. If anyone has an answer, you can go ahead. Anyone want to
say?
It's Pod.
Ooh,
it's Pod for you. That's interesting.
I think it would be. It would be Hodor.
Hodor.
Even though I'm fairly confident it's not going to be, but that would for me because the idea would be going back all this time. Hodor's been the undead slave, it would just be.
I think right now Grey Worm is who I think of because of that scene and like how he was, a slave as well, like what you're talking about there, and because like Missandei's there, the idea of a pairing of people who could face each other. So like similarly, the idea of if one of Sam or Gilly became one, or one of Jaime or Brienne, the idea of someone facing a loved one like that.
Yeah,
I've been having so much like creepy fun trying to come up with those combinations.
Yeah,
it's a really fun and upsetting exercise.
I'm picturing like Sansa seeing Arya undead or something. Some terrible ones, really terrible.
Jaime having to kill an undead Brienne.
God. Yeah. What about not that it's as terrifying because I don't think we're quite a lot of people aren't nearly as big a fan of Jorah, but what if there's another one of those undead bears, and Jorah is undead riding it. The bear riding the undead
Danny has to burn him to the ground.
That's all I want. Yeah, yes. We were talking about undead Jorah and how on our podcast Storm Spoilers, we were talking about undead Jorah and how Daenerys might have to kill him. And my co-host Dave Gonzalez is like, "Oh, that'd be the world's saddest Dracarys." Just like roast Jorah to stop him. So
someone brings up Brienne having to kill an undead Sansa. Seems very unlikely, but like the idea of like the protector killing the protected.
Oh my god, that would be tragic as all hell. But yeah, you're right. It doesn't seem that likely, but it's a good thought.
Yeah, it's
good bad thought.
Good bad thought.
Okay. So I think the reason I think all of this is going to happen, or one of the reasons happen in episode 3, is so then we could get the traumatized, shell-shocked survivors, right? Like if you see this, if you see your friends and loved ones not just killed but then resurrected and killed again, like that's so much drama for the last 3 episodes of the season, So
I made this point on Twitter that it's because it kind of just struck me that the way we used to talk about Game of Thrones, The Song of Ice and Fire, is that it's low magic fantasy. And now we have an immortal necromancer king riding an undead dragon that breathes blue fire who wants to kill a boy who knows everything.
Yeah. A little different.
Yeah.
Low level fantasy indeed. Yeah.
So we're at the hour mark, so I think we want to get into a little mid-roll action here.
That's right. Thanks for covering me there. And I pulled my headphones cord out while making my silly joke there.
I think it was all me, to be honest with you.
So yeah, a couple of thanks, a couple of shout outs. Thank you to our Blood Rider patrons. That's Vorsaki, wielder of a Valyrian steel arak with a dragonbone hilt. Koa Koi, called Sunpiercer, wielder of a dragonbone bow and founder of a new podcast on Amelia Earhart. Check that out. Kukavo the Tamer, wielder of a Wildfire Whip Gehenna, or the Wildfire Whip Gehenna.
Yeah.
Very cool. And
We see more Blood Riders in our podcast than we do in Game of Thrones.
That's true.
The low bar, though.
Yeah.
I know.
That's, by the way, an important thing about Jorah that we didn't talk about is that's why someone pointed out that he's the one leading the Dothraki with the Dothraki.
Yeah.
And that's important because he speaks Dothraki. And like if he
Yes.
dies, that's like Danny's like the only one who knows Dothraki.
Danny and Missandei, at least.
Missandei, of course,
knows
of course.
Missandei's
She knows
got
all
it
the
down,
languages.
but
Yeah.
still, not very many.
Yeah, I'm not worried about Missandei in the short term. Well, I'm worried about everybody a little bit.
Yeah,
but Missandei, I
sure.
think, she's got to be around to be sad that Grey Worm died. Damn it. That's really sad. Okay. Also, thanks to our Northern Champions
We really
patrons.
need them now more than ever.
Yes, we really need these Northern Champions now more than ever. It's true. And I can't find them. Here
There
they
they
are.
are.
Jay Wilson, Winter's King. Sir Stephen, Hammer of the North. Winter's King, Lord of the First Men. Lady Ardross, Mother of Wolves, wielder of the Valyrian Steel Claymore Manticore. Sir Brian the Return, Knight of the Last House, wielder of the Valyrian Steel Blade Red Song. Sir Kobe of House Stonesmith, words are wind, deeds are stone. Lady Cat Jones of the Big Pond is wielder of the Valyrian Steel Blade Ginger's Honor. Jake Snow, a.k.a. Jacob Ice Eyes, is the bastard of the Last River. Lord Darren of House Rambler, motto, the last hunt is ceaseless. Lady Bobby of House Mitchell. And Bullwearer the Purple of Heavenly Mythhead House Taurus. Cool. That is our mid-roll action. We can move on now. Let's talk about... Well, actually, there's one thing I wanted to talk about, or two other little things I wanted to talk about. Joanna, we should trash talk a little bit with our fantasy game.
Oh, of course.
Oh.
The Verge
draft.
is hosting a fantasy Game of Thrones fantasy game that we both have teams in. History of Westeros and Storm of Spoilers both have teams. I think you guys are.
Con of Thrones and Watchers on the Wall.
And Sam Coleman has his own team.
And Sam Coleman. Yeah, we're beating you.
You are beating us right now. Yeah, we're ready to go to make a big move up. Though we drafted heavily on the people who fight. We got the Hound, we got Brienne, we got Viserion, or not Viserion. We got Drogon and Rhaegal.
It's gonna be good for us.
So we hope to score a lot of points through killing. We war drafted.
I see how it is. We're still not over that time you guys beat us at trivia.
Like this is making
by 1 point that we argued for.
Yeah, that 1 point that you beat us by, it was like 2 years ago, and I still haven't forgotten. So this is vengeance.
Yeah, vengeance,
Yeah.
justice, fire, and blood.
Mhm.
Also want to announce that the Jenny song is what we're going to move on to next, but so inspiring. So many people have made covers of it. I want to join the cover train of making of singing the song, but I really can't right now because we have so much going on. I have 3 podcasts to edit before we leave tomorrow. And one of them was our this bonus episode that we actually recorded an interview with Max Brooks, the of World War Z fame. And so I have kind of compromised. I'm not going to do this now, but I made it a patron goal that's not going to happen soon. I put it kind of high up there so that we don't hit it soon because I don't have time to do it soon, but I want to do it eventually. So it'll be fun maybe if we hit that goal months down the line to revisit Jenny's song through hopefully a decent performance by me.
And you were talking about the idea of singing it as a group to this weekend at Addison FireCon. I feel like that's bound to happen.
I think we could do that. I think we could pull that
Group
off.
sing.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
so that'll be fun.
And maybe some of us might.
I'm going to record it with I got this field recorder and my condenser mic, and I'm going to record you guys singing. Get you guys to all sign waivers. I don't know.
Man.
Your time will come.
Well, let's gush about Jenny's song instead of talking about that.
To start off, I want to share this piece of artwork. The lovely Naomi Makes Art on Twitter. It's already killing it. She did this piece of Jenny of Oldstones. You can see on the screen right now. And I just wanted to give her a little shout out because she's just so prolific, and she has a Patreon that you can sign up for and get art.
As we have.
Yes.
That's
as
right.
we have. And so, yeah, anyways, just here's a nice art to go with it.
Right on. So let me run through real quick the basic details of the Ghost of High Heart, Jenny's song stuff, and then y'all weigh in with any stuff you want to add in and thoughts we have on the whole business. So the Ghost of High Heart, which we know from the books, isn't in the show. the Arya and the Brotherhood meet her, and she gives all these very accurate prophecies. Well, back in the day, back during the time of Summerhall, before Summerhall, which was in 259, so about 40 years before the books, Jenny of Oldstones hung out with the Ghost of Highheart, who she claims is a child of the forest. Now, we don't know how they met or why, but Oldstones is a ruined castle that...
I think.
What's that?
Smoking weed.
Smoking weed, yeah,
Just
they were
hanging
hooking out. Yeah. And for somehow, Duncan the Small, who is named for Duncan the Tall, he's the firstborn of Egg. And by the way, the show removed Jaehaerys II, so Egg is Aerys' father in the show, by the way. I didn't realize that till recently.
Clarification to make.
Yeah.
I
they did.
I didn't realize that until someone yelled at me about the family tree that I used in an article, and then someone came because I was using the show family tree.
Oh.
It was like, oh, actually, they changed it in the show, and I was like, oh, in on a technicality. Yeah.
So Jenny of Oldstone somehow meets Duncan the Small, who falls in love and gives up his crown. He's the heir to the throne. And she's brought to court, and her prophecy, which I guess wasn't as accurate then as it was for the Brotherhood, was that the prince that was promised would be born in their line. And that, by the way, had a lot to do with the Targaryens kind of getting back into forced marriages.
So what was the exact
marriages.
wording there? In their line, like they're just standing in line at the store, and someone was born
in the queue.
Yeah, in the queue.
From their queue.
Well, doesn't technically it's still in their line can mean generations down the line.
I know,
Yeah.
exactly.
Oh yeah.
So, I still think she's accurate.
Yeah. Oh, she got it right. But there was a lot of damage done by people who thought it was them in the meantime, because Egg thought he was fulfilling, and then Rhaegar, who was born at Summerhall, blah blah blah. Yeah. So that's the Ghost of Highheart, of course, is still alive and gorged on grief at Summerhall, as she says, and she asks for Jenny's song every time the Brotherhood show up. That's like part of her payment. She wants a kiss, some wine, and Jenny's song sung by Thomas Evans. So the show obviously isn't getting into that too much, but it's so cool that it was on the show at all. We never expected any of this business to make it on the show, so it was just amazing. We did cover a lot of this very thoroughly back in 2015 with the tragedy of Summerhall and the shadow of Summerhall, Aerys and Rhaegar and all this business. So that's my spiel. Lady Gwyn, let's start. We haven't heard from you in a minute, so give us your thoughts about just Jenny's song and the historical significance and the way everything is tied together so well. Whatever you want to say.
Yeah, I want to say that, gosh, I love this song, and you, like you said, never expected to see this stuff coming into play, and the whole way it tied in with Duncan Egg, with Jaime and Brienne, and then with RLJ, which we'll talk about, again later, I assume. Rhaegar, like the Ghost of Highheart, was also very moved by Summerhall tragedy. She was, mourning the loss of her Jenny, who was married to Duncan the Small, who died there, presumably. But there are fan theories. I'm trying to say is that Rhaegar and the Ghost of Highheart would actually meet up at the ruins, and that he would play the song for her. Good
theory. Yeah,
it's an interesting theory. Speaking of Rhaegar singing the songs, there's a fairly common conclusion in the fandom that he sang that song to Lyanna.
And that's the scene where she punches Benjen for laughing at her, right?
Yeah. So that's
right.
But that's where, that's the tie-in to RLJ. So this song was just such an unexpected thing and such a masterful stroke of tying together those two major components of this episode, plus encapsulating something that we'll also talk about shortly, one of the major themes of the episode.
Yeah.
It was stunning to me because it really pulled it all together.
Yeah, there's a lot of layers to this. Yeah.
It's just the kind of depth we really have kind of forgotten can exist in the show, not to be so mean, but it's kind of true. So yeah, Joanna, please, your turn to gush.
No, I it's worth mentioning, as everyone probably in this listening to this knows, because you guys know the book so well, that there's like literally one line of this song in the books, you know what I mean? So they had to add all these lyrics that Dan Weiss wrote, all those extra lyrics. Brian Cogman was telling me on my podcast that he's like, oh yeah, we wrote in that we were going to do Jenny's song, and I wrote lyrics TK, and then I sent the draft off to Weiss and Benioff, and I got it back, and Dan Weiss had written all the lyrics, and I was going to write them. Yeah. So
well, he did a good job.
Yeah, no, he did an amazing job. Brian was like, oh, I think he wanted those. It's ASCAP, right? That does like song royalties. He's like, I think he wanted that royalty check, because Brian Cogman wrote the lyrics to the actual lyrics. So it's always somewhere under the sea. He's like, I get a nice check every now and then because I wrote that. So
anyway. Sneaky. Meta. There's some meta reasons for that.
But yeah, so Weiss wrote those lyrics, and I think as Lady Gwyn here said, we're going to talk about those themes, but I think they're so beautiful, the extra lyrics that they put in there, and it was just like so lovely to have Pod do it in this way that like feels like such an invocation of like Pippin singing in Return of the King, like all of this just really beautiful fantasy, we're going off to war kind of stuff tied into all this book lore. It just felt like a gift, as we've been saying like since the top of this episode. This episode of TV felt like a love letter to the fandom, to the book fans specifically. And so to have I was like, oh, I didn't know there was another song they were going to give us. Like, lovely. A gift for all of us. And it's so like the melody is so beautiful. And like when the show does something like that, I was talking about this elsewhere, but when the show does that, when it does like Rains of Castamere or The Bear and the Maiden Fair, it sort of codifies this tune to a song that we like knew as book readers, but we didn't have like a tune for it. I'm sure there, like, I know that other people had performed the songs, versions of the songs, book fans had written music and stuff like that. But now here's a tune that like probably we'll all wind up agreeing on that this is the tune to Jenny's song, and like this becomes this new gift for us. So, yeah,
very well said. Yeah, just to tie together some of that stuff as well. I'll get your take as well, Shaya, but just to throw it out there, the song starts with the reminding us of Duncan and Summerhall, and then as the montage proceeds, you have different characters and showing different things, and they're dancing with their ghosts, which is the next section we have in this episode. We have every character's dancing with their ghost moment, which I'm really excited to talk about. And then, like you said, it finishes with Dany and Jon, who not only there's a lot of resonance for them in terms of the plot and the idea of the succession, but also in terms of how it might even go for them with the concept of someone giving up their crown for love, which could fit into that a whole thing as well.
Yeah. Okay, a few thoughts off the bat. One is the lyrics were just phenomenal. I mean, we had the first line, which went, high in the halls of the kings who are gone, Jenny would dance with her ghosts. But then he added, a bit more to that, which fits very well with the ideas of the songs, with what you're going to talk about with, Oldstones, and the idea that it's Oldstones versus Summerhall, and the lyrics fit with that as well, while also having such resonance for the shots we saw in that episode, and for the themes of each character that we're going to talk about going forward. But I thought it was also interesting in the Entertainment Weekly article, the interview about the lyrics. They highlighted the themes of these lyrics about it being warm and having fellowship together, and how they wish it could last longer, but it's not going to, like this scene, which is very much not what I took out of it. Like it was part of it, but really speaks to like the depth of the song, perhaps.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah. And of course this lyric, you wrote the lyrics here. And the one lyric is, they spun her around on the damp old stones, which is a nice little touch because she's Jenny of Oldstones. And so that is kind of a clue that, like you said, it's not necessarily clear whether it was Summerhall or Oldstones you're referring to, but this sort of strongly points towards Oldstones as the place that that's being referred to. But
the other thing it raised the question of is, will Winterfell fall? If we're seeing this scene, this montage in Winterfell before this battle, and it's really about these ruins of Oldstones and Summerhall, it makes me more worried about Winterfell itself than I was before.
Okay,
because I kind of thought it could be salvaged.
Let me just toss out this quote from Catelyn, what she says to Robb in A Storm of Swords. Well, when they're there at Oldstones, they're talking about Jenny, this song. And she says to Rob, we're all just songs in the end, if we're lucky.
Yeah.
That's great.
And so if you think, just to
Beautiful.
just when you merge that with the themes that we're going to talk about in this, it's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
So,
and not to get too whatever in the weeds about it, but and then this is the song, not just Jenny's song, but this show, these books are the song of these people, right? And the song that they've become. I was struck by that most watching this episode when Sam gives Heartsbane to Jorah, and I was just thinking about this idea of passing swords down, and how if you've got the story of this story generations later, you'd be and then at the Battle of Winterfell, Samwell Tarly gave the sword to Ser Jorah Mormont, and it became a Mormont blade. The history of these swords are being written in front of us. And it's just it's all gonna be over soon.
That's what that sentiment from Dan is meta in that sense, where we want it to keep going, but it won't.
Never want it to leave. Yeah, exactly.
And also one last thought on that.
Oh, really?
Or not.
No,
I lost my thought.
We're down here to Dancing with Their Ghosts. I think we're on to this next section. Right?
Yeah, let's go ahead and move on to Dancing with Their
We've
Ghosts.
got about half an hour, 35 minutes left in this.
Cool. So one of the constantly rising number of reasons why Jenny's song was an incredible touch is how it reflects this major theme of the episode of every character sort of dancing with their own ghosts or with each other's ghosts in some cases. Yeah. Tyrion even says something about the perils of self-betterment, right, Lady Gwyn?
Yeah. I think you see everybody reflecting on change, on the ghosts of their former selves, and where their redemption has brought them.
Yeah.
So, you see that in other scenes too. I mean, even before this with Sandor and Arya, with him saying you used to be, so quiet, but you see some characters specifically talking about it. You see that with Brienne and Jaime.
Yeah.
It's sometimes explicitly stated in the episode for sure.
Yeah, I think it's a major theme in this. Yeah.
It's really overwhelming. The more you look at it, the more it just pops out. A quick line from Tyrion: "We dance on the strings of those who came before us," but with the dancing theme here. But a lot of the characters in this episode have learned to sort of cut those strings with great difficulty and kind of become their own person and sort of leave behind what they were, and in a lot of cases what someone else made them, or multiple people made them, or the world made them. And let's start off with Jaime and Tyrion talking about how their father would react to them fighting for Winterfell and how he would just he would blow a gasket. So they're just discussing the ghost of Tywin, and they admit their failures with regard to Cersei, who it's kind of a ghost of them now because there's no going back.
I didn't think they were going to go there with Tywin being aghast at them at Winterfell. I just really want to see Tywin's reaction to actually seeing these White Walkers and the Night King.
We're
this is where I first went with it.
Yes, right.
He
was so dismissive.
Yeah, he was extremely dismissive.
When he finally break his facial features would finally be oh, that is terrifying actually.
Yeah, I just would like to see Tywin really scared.
Yeah. So will we see? Here's a tough question. Yeah. Will we see a white Tyrion? I don't mean white. He's already white. I mean white, undead Tyrion.
WFGH2.
Yeah. What do you guys think? Anyone want to answer first?
Is that too painful to even try to answer?
It's in my head, all I can think of is that screaming emoji.
Yeah, and he's the one who says, "Maybe I'll walk down rise up and
which is
rip Cersei in half."
He doesn't do it because they made it so on the nose.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it was too on the nose to be foreshadowing. It was just too.
You did say he was optimistic.
Yeah,
I think we'll survive. So hopefully not.
One person pointed out, by the way, that he got his optimism seemed to have strike a different tone after that secret conversation with Bran that we don't see. He was talking about how everyone's going to die, and then after that he started to become more optimistic.
I've seen a lot of people theorizing that Tyrion and Bran sat there and talked, and they came up with a little tweak to the plan, and I have seen that as a common idea. I mean, Tyrion, they keep talking about how important Tyrion's mind is. If Bran laid everything out for him, he should be doing more often. Every time we have a conversation with anyone, I'm like, why aren't you telling them fire is really good against the whites, or any number of little things. Yeah. I guess we just don't need to see them repeating it, but still there's some crucial information out there that Tyrion needs some more pieces.
Yeah, that's true. Okay.
Yeah, I think something happened
Joanna,
there.
Oh yeah. Do you think either A, we will see Tyrion become a white, and B, do you think Tyrion has anything up his sleeve with Bran?
I asked Brian Cogman, what was that conversation between Bran and Tyrion that we cut away from? And he said, he started answering with sort of they talked about Bran's journey. And I was like, okay, is that it? And he was like, well, I know what they talk about, but like better not say it. So I was like, God damn it. So
that means it's important.
It might be important, or maybe he's just playing coy.
Okay, yeah, he could be.
Who knows? But I don't know. Like, I feel like, there was this big controversy around the Cersei and Tyrion scene conversation at the end of last season, which we cut away from, and everyone's like, "What is their secret plot?" And I think we found out that there was no secret plot. So sometimes I think they just cut away from a conversation because they cut away from a conversation
because it's boring.
Yeah, sometimes they just have to do that. There's just a lot of it, in the last.
Yeah.
So people.
It was suspicious enough that I was like, "What was that?" But I think it might be nothing. So
I love the suggestion from the chat. You're laughing at the same one, aren't you,
Yeah,
Shea?
I am.
AYK says, "Why don't they just chop Bran's hand off and tie it onto the tree? Because it's where the mark is,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
Then him
And he could really be like Jaime.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Cut off the mark. I've been seeing people in your chat talk this whole time about cutting off Bran's arm. I'm like, I don't understand.
I don't know why, but no, the mark. Okay.
Got it. I thought everyone's just like really sadistic. I get it.
Yeah. And of course, Bran is clearly someone who has changed dramatically, and Jaime's flat out says to him, "I'm not the man I was." So they have that conversation of dancing with their ghosts. Sandor is no longer self-serving. We kind of covered that already. He mentions Thoros to Beric, who is kind of a character that fits the description of Ghost better than just about anyone other than maybe, Ghost. And because he's already dead. And but it's interesting because Beric is one of the few characters in the show at this point who isn't. His transformation came long ago. He's one of the few rocks. He's consistent.
Yeah, he's very static.
Yeah. The other example of that is Tormund. Tormund is someone who hasn't really changed a lot. He's adapted to the changing circumstances, but he is still very much Tormund. His personality is basically unchanged, which is cool. It's cool to have some consistency,
Yeah.
Arya, no longer chatty, according to Sandor, and no longer a virgin. So that's a change. So question for everybody. Does Gendry and Arya hook up in the books?
Does Gendry?
Yeah, do Gendry and Arya hook up in the books? Joanna, let's start with you.
Yes, why not?
Why
Cool.
not?
Sure.
Jesus, why not?
I mean, why not? I don't know if Arya will ever be that old in the books.
Oh, yeah. That's a problem,
Right?
yeah. Mm-hmm.
How old is she currently in the books?
Like 12.
12.
And
I mean,
if she had a 5-year gap, then okay,
Right.
she gets to 17, and that's reasonable, feasible.
That is the big problem, yeah.
Chin, yeah, but since George did not get to do his time hop, then I don't know if that will happen.
Yeah, see, I think it's interesting because I think it's interesting because Arya definitely in the books as has been sexualized in a way, even despite being that young, and so I wonder what connection that has without getting too much into the mercy stuff and all that. Just I'm curious about that connection and if we see threads of that there with Arya having some more experiences and then being a little more early in her promiscuity. It's not surprising to me. Teenagers have sex at 13 and 12 all the time already.
Yeah.
So
They sure do.
and they do in the books already too. So the idea of another year passes and Arya's 13 and she still sleeps with Gendry. It's totally possible, I think. And at least it would be a better sex scene for her than the ones that are alluded to as possibilities in the books.
Right on.
Yeah.
So more transformations. We have
with this Arya stuff though. We were talking about this Arya transformation, and this is where I wanted to give a shout out to Still Watching, because Cogman in that interview you did with him specifically touched on how Arya is not the person that Gendry knew, and he says, and in many ways that's what's attractive about her here because she has changed, but there's that darkness too. Interesting thought to me.
If he's remembering her as a young girl, that's a little weird to be
a
attracted to.
weird.
But now that he's convinced that she's transformed, that's
true. That's a good point.
Helps. Yeah, he sees her be a badass, then he sees her with the scars, and because at first when they met, he was trying to stay. You can't fight, and then she quickly proves that I can fight.
Yeah.
So Bran, not only is Bran transformed into something that isn't Brandon Stark, but he's now bait. That's what he is. He's transformed into bait.
There's this interesting idea, to your point about transformation, there's this interesting idea of the Starks going out in the world having to change, like leaving the safety and the home and security of Winterfell, that like the walls of Winterfell, Ned Stark's like protection and all that sort of stuff, going out into the world, having to learn how to protect themselves, becoming these very hardened creatures because of this like very scary world they went into, then coming back to Winterfell and starting to like soften up a bit because they're home, and they like what I feel like this season or this return to Winterfell, however brief it may be, is like a return to being a Stark. You know what I mean? Because like Sansa and Arya and Jon and like Theon and Bran and like all of them like went out and just lost touch with the Ned of it all, and so much of this is about reconnecting with that Nedness.
Nedness. I love it.
I wanted to say real quick about the Bran and Jaime bit. Where Bran tells Jaime in that conversation, he says, "You won't be able to help us in this fight if I let them murder you first." Jaime says, "What about afterwards?" And Bran goes, "How do you know there is an afterwards?" Couple questions there I just wanted to like touch on real quick. One is, what is Jaime going to do in this fight that Bran might see that he is actually very crucial for? Just some food for thought. And two is the idea of Jaime saying, "What about afterwards?" Is Bran doomed rather than the world being doomed? Bran doesn't see the future. He doesn't see past his own death.
Yeah.
Just wanted to throw that out there.
That's a good call. Any response to that?
Yeah, I was trying to go quickly just again because I know we're at a quick pace here, but I still wanted,
Really quickly, I promise, that from a show doesn't want to tip the hand of the outcome of the Battle of Winterfell, to have Bran say something that mysterious is like, "Who says there's an after?" is leaving a question mark for you. But
yeah, that's a good point. That it's just a standard thing for the perfect little soundbite, whatever.
Right.
So more ghost dancing. Brienne becomes a knight. Becomes
Every time
something
you say
she wasn't.
this, I think of Ghost, the dire wolf dancing. By the way, I've had this picture multiple times.
Well, we and in the books we get the idea of ghost juggling, right? John says, "I'd love to see Ghost juggle to Alex
Ghost
Thorne."
juggle, yes.
And so when Brienne becomes a knight, we also have earlier in the episode a group of scared men who say they aren't soldiers, and Davos says, "Well, you are now." And that is a callback to Davos himself being at Blackwater, where he was thinking of how he's a smuggler, but now he's a soldier. And that's a neat kind of transformation, going from like it's like a different types of soldiery ranks sort of thing.
And at one point he was a good married man, and now he just, I don't know, never seen him write a letter to his wife once.
Yeah, that would happen off screen.
I know it would. I just like to give them a hard time. Poor Davos. Poor Davos' wife.
Mariah.
Yes.
Mariah.
Sansa and Theon have a shared ghost in the name of Ramsay, a ghost that will never not haunt them at least a little bit. There's no way you can forget that life experience. And he's trying to bury the ghost of redemption, or the ghost of Ramsay through redemption, because he has his own ghosts, killing the Miller's boys and Sir Roderick, and redemption is the one way to at least sort of put that to rest.
The destruction of Winterfell makes is even more bittersweet to me, with the idea of like Sansa and Theon. They had so many good memories in it, but also so many really bad memories.
Really bad,
like,
yeah.
Maybe it's for the best they don't live out their lives in this place where they were traumatized.
Mm-hmm.
I think about watching like Craster's daughters watching Craster's keep burn. Like there would maybe be a part of Sansa and Theon being like, "All right, burn it down."
Yeah.
Let's start again.
And Lady Gwyn, what do you think about Sansa Theon here?
Well, I think about Theon specifically, that he, in addition to all those other ghosts, that he's haunted by Ramsay, by himself, by the ghost of the person that he was. He's haunted by the ghost of Robb Stark. He thinks of him a lot. In A Dance with Dragons, he thinks, "I should have died with him." And we mentioned this last week, that we've concluded that he has this kind of one last redemptive arrow shot in him. He has settled his identity crisis, and now he's going to give everything he's got to defending Bran, in a mirror to what he did early on in Game of Thrones when he killed the wildling, and Robb was so furious at him. So I think that in this way he's going to lay that angry Rob Ghost to rest finally.
That's a
by
good call. I
saving
hadn't thought
Bran
about
with that arrow shot.
Yeah, that early scene with Theon shooting the arrow to save Bran. I didn't think about that. That's a great catch. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Moving on, a very unscared but very scarred little girl named Tila charms Gilly and Davos, and they dance with the ghost of Shireen as a result.
And I had remembered, of course, that Gilly interacted with Shireen, but it took me a second to put two and two together that she taught both of them how to read specifically. So this is very meaningful and sadder moment. But a little side note about kind of hits more on what Sean was wondering about in our show only review. He was thinking about how some moments are contrived, perhaps, and how sometimes that has to happen. And Cogman stated about this, and he said that he did write, a version of it where Davos and Gilly start talking about Shireen. Like, they talk about her, and it just felt too contrived. So they, he got notes, and they changed it. So just a little aside as well about that. But I liked seeing, Gilly in particular, how much she has changed from being in Craster's Keep. She doesn't really have exposure to the world at large or to knowledge. And now here she is in Winterfell with, ladies to model her hair after and, little girls to, try to boost up. And she's out there. I'm happy for Gilly. Team Gilly.
Yeah, go Gilly.
Yeah, I gotta go back in time and say my boggart white might be Gilly. I really need Gilly and little Sam to pull through this.
Yeah, little Sam White. We really can't have a little Sam.
Little Sam just needs to go hug his White Walker brothers, and all will be good.
Exactly, since all those White Walkers are her brother uncles.
Good point.
Yeah.
By the way, that's an unrealized mystery there. Do the White Walkers just go straight from baby to old man, or what? Is there any sort of in between?
There's no in between.
There's no in between.
There's no teen White Walker.
Somewhere out there, there's an adolescent White Walker.
Teen White Walkers go through a fire phase when they're rebellious and they start to
funny hairdo, and pants down. Right?
Night King still has a funny hairdo. He never grew out of that. Still has those hair spikes.
Yeah, he's the teen one. Their king is their teen.
Rob Stark, right? He's just same thing. So John and Sam and Ed recall their fallen brothers. Lots of ghosts there, while Ghost sits by nearby.
A little smaller. He hasn't been eaten as much.
Yeah, smaller Ghost. Shrunken Ghost. Seriously, if they really, it would have been a huge fail. Even though they hardly ever have ghosts, it would have been a really huge fail to not have Ghost in an episode full of ghosts. Really, come on.
Yeah, definitely.
And that was
I really felt that the ghosts. I just wanted to say that of the past Night's Watch as in that scene, very palpable.
Yeah,
them looking out over,
looking out, standing on the wall, looking at,
waiting for the horn blast. Yeah,
I was rewatching. I don't know if you guys ever watched these YouTube compilations. There are some dedicated fellow or out there or lady who has will take a character and put together all of their scenes, and it'll be a minor character. So I watched the Lord Commander Ed Tullart's compilation, all the Ed scenes.
Oh, that's great.
And there's this great when he says last one alive, burn us or whatever. I knew that was a callback to something. I just couldn't remember what it was. And it's a scene with Pip and Gren and Sam and John, and they're all sitting there, and Ed says be a good lad, burn us, or something like that. But it was a moment with it was a callback to a moment where all five of them were together, and then it was just three left, and they're here's to Pip and Gren and all the other guys we left behind.
Yeah. Okay. Then we have Jorah and Sam laying the ghost of Jeor Mormont to rest. You'd think that if he could see that moment between them, it would make him smile from beyond the grave. Tormund brings up Jaime's former identity and tells of who he came to be. There's no ghost, like I said. Tormund's kind of an exception, he being who he is. But it's fun to talk about Tormund's stories because we get
a little ghost here.
Yeah.
A little, well, no, I'm not as a joke. I just mean truly. I think Tormund cared about Ygritte.
Okay.
I think he did, and when he greets John, he had to, make his peace with what happened there, and he hugs him and calls him my little crow, and I genuinely there's a few moments in the show where Tormund was kind of getting involved in their relationship and not wanting it to blow up like he knew it would.
Yeah.
I really missed Ygritte in the scene where Tormund's talking about his giant suckling a giant's
breast. Oh yeah, she would have given him so much shit for that.
We know you never fucked a bear. Like, she would have said something.
So Lady Gwyn, who long ago, earlier in our show reviews, coined the term the law of conservation of actors. We get the law of conservation of origin stories with Tormund here, where the giant babe and the mother of bears are combined into one story.
One terrible story. Like, I really was expecting someone to say something more to him about how, like, this isn't really a story you brag about. To me.
We were right there with everyone else in the room just going,
what? Who is this guy? Well, he's pretty entertaining. Glad he's on our side. That's what they're saying. Yeah. And of course, we have the enemy, the Walkers and the Night King and the Dead. The metaphor of ghosts works super well for them. They're the oldest ghosts of all, and you don't really need to explain that. But the line that ends the moment that ends the song is with Jon and Dany, and Jon becomes Aegon, dancing with the ghost of his mother in the crypt. And of course, Ned and Rhaegar are a big part of this conversation. So there's all sorts of powerful ghosts in this scene. And Dany, it's a transformation for her as well. She's also dancing with the ghost of her father and brother, and her own childhood, because she was just reminded of Jaime and all that stuff, like the death of her father and Viserys telling her all this stuff about how we're going to get him one day. And then, of course, the big change in her, legal status, which Jon doesn't even seem to realize is what he's saying. He's like, wait.
It makes sense when you think about it, too, because, like, Daenerys is faced again with the idea of, okay, my father really was a terrible man. The things my brother told me were wrong.
Yeah.
Well, my brother told me that my other brother was a good man. Maybe he did. He raped this woman. He did these things. I guess I need to make my peace for good, that this is what happened. And she's down there thinking about it. And then Jon says, no, actually, your brother was right about him being a good man. He just, didn't handle things that well.
Yeah. They had different priorities in that moment. It's pretty interesting. But let's not talk about that just yet. Lady Gwyn, you had a thought on Tyrion as well here.
With Tyrion and Dany, I mean, to talk about ghosts, it's a parallel I had never considered very deeply, is the parallel between Dany and Tyrion and Aerys and Tywin. And I got a real strong sense of that in the scene when they're talking about his missteps.
Ooh, yeah.
I feel like that was purposeful.
What do you think, Joanna?
Yeah, no, I hadn't even thought about that connection.
That's a good one.
My mind's a little blown by it.
Okay.
I'm surprised that we've never talked about it, to be honest. When it came, I was like, oh my word, that seems so obvious. Yeah.
Yeah, the idea of, if we could, the idea of Jon and Dany had different things on their mind in that moment. Is this something you have notes on already, Ashaya, for later?
On what?
On Jon and Dany's different. Yeah, we have Dany's reactions. Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's talk about the second set of questions. We'll move on from the ghost section. I know we don't have a lot of time, so I'll just blast through this as quick as possible.
We're close. We just have the Dany's reactions section, and we're done.
Okay,
really.
Cool. Will Gilly and Sam become walkers, not whites, and join their brothers? Ooh, hadn't thought about it that way. Probably
the
not.
first female walker.
Yeah,
she's
that
really breaking that glass ceiling.
Well,
I love it.
That dragon glass ceiling.
Yeah.
Dragon glass, yes.
Boom.
I am concerned for that baby, though. She took him away
to
save him from this fate, and now he's right there.
I hope there's like an age limit, or they're like too old for us. A little gamey. I don't know.
Like, once they have a name,
old.
maybe
Marin Trant. Yeah.
Marin Trant is a White Walker. He was he missed his true calling. He fits right in. He's horrible. Okay, so let's handle a set of questions here, or the rest of the questions rather.
Yes.
Dornish Dan says, the dragon is not a slave. Some believe Viserion is not a slave to Night King. The dragon's blue eyes are different than the human whites, therefore not a zombie minion. Thoughts? Yeah, it's kind of vague. It's kind of not clear. There might be like direct touch is a different kind of thing.
Yeah, because he was letting Night King ride him.
Yeah.
So.
And he's like the white and he has full use of all his limbs and his dragon fire and all that. Yes. It seems more along the White Walker magic side. I agree. Do you guys feel differently?
Yeah.
I think it's more of a White Walker than a white dragon, and I still prefer just saying ice dragon.
White
flyer. I don't want to mess with it.
Yeah.
I like to say zombie dragon because it
Zombie
just
dragon,
like
yeah.
steps away from everything, because I don't
Yeah.
even think like the show has been consistent with the way they talk about it. So like I
Yeah.
think they don't care about the distinction, which bothers us.
Yeah.
But like,
Yeah.
you know, not them.
I think if there's an undead dragon in the books, it will be more clear what's going on.
Right.
Maybe not so.
Mm-hmm.
Acre Frey says, has Joanna said Irish wristwatch yet? Did we
gotta
get you to
say
do
it
Irish
3
wristwatch
times.
last time?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, say Irish wristwatch 3
You
times
can't even do it
fast.
once.
See, I can't even do it, yeah.
Irish wristwatch, Irish wristwatch, Irish wristwatch.
Okay.
Much love from Acre Frey for that. Thank
Very
you very
well.
much.
All right.
Chris Trombley says, despite the song being made 2 centuries later, the Jenny of Oldstone team got myself thinking of Rhaena Targaryen reminiscing about her ghosts with Larissa Valerian on Evenstar. That's a good catch, yes. And of course, we've talked about Rhaena as a parallel for Cersei. The Queen in the West business is a lot of meat to dig into there.
Yeah,
as
I
far
think
as
if you
theorizing.
look around at the history in any part of A Song of Ice and Fire, you'll find these themes of loss, and in really just about any literature period, you'll like this is why this song is really so brilliant that it can resonate for so many things. I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, getting back to the Harrenhal thing, because she ends up at Harrenhal, which is full of ghosts, but they're not her ghosts. So
Yeah,
the idea that if in the books they do end up at Harrenhal,
that's a great idea. Yeah, because she says, "Oh, they're not my ghosts; they won't bother me." That's
right. Yeah.
that line becomes a lot more telling in that. Yeah, good catch.
Mm-hmm.
Three-Eyed Monkey, who is, I guess, a relative of Three-Eyed Raven, asks, is the RLJ reveal complete? Mira is sure to return, but will she bring Howland? Will Howland reveal why the prince that was promised was conceived? Perhaps Howland Reed knows Jon must die. Love the channel, guys. Thanks. I don't know that Howland and Mira are sure to return in the show, but in the books, yeah.
Yeah. I don't think Mira is coming back on the show.
Okay.
And I was just saying, like, so this is the 3rd time that we've seen that reveal, right? Of like, this is actually who my parents are. And I was just joking the other day. I was like, can Jon hire like a dragon to like skywrite the news so that we don't ever have to tell anyone in Westeros again? Like,
well, see, Sean, like one of our, Sean, who you met, he has brought up some thoughts about the average show viewer that was worth mentioning again sometimes, which is that sometimes they really aren't following that, and like I give them more credit than I should, I guess. But I was talking to my dad, and I asked him. He was like, he asked me, he was like, so how are they those two related again? Are they related? And that was after watching episode 1 and 2. He's seen the whole show. And
one reason that your dad might need why has no one ever said like the word incest yet? No one has ever said yet, and that makes you her, and that makes what you did this.
Yeah.
No one has said that yet, and I don't know why.
So like they haven't really like some of the ways which we're about to get into after this is about how it might portray Dany in a certain way and Jon in a certain way, but some of that is maybe for the viewer. And yes, we can continue with these super chats, but it is worth mentioning that. Yeah,
we're actually almost there. We just have Chris Trombley said followed up his super chat with the same reference we just made about Maegor Towers and Rhaena's ghost, etc., or them being his ghost, really. Lady Marmalade says, thank you for the great convo. Well, you're welcome, Lady Marmalade. We'll try to keep it going and keep it coming in the future. Jill Wright says, Davos won't be able to kill the little girl white. That would be Tila. Yeah, that was kind of what we were saying with the Carsey vibes. It could be Davos, could be Carsey in this spot here, which would be damn sad, but I can't exactly say it's not likely. It's definitely, there's some foreshadowing for it. Jessica Pick, super chat, but no question. Thank you, Jessica. Armando C., any thoughts on how much Dance 2.0 future book plot will make its way into the Daenerys and Aegon show tension? Has that ship sailed?
Also, hey, Armando.
Oh, yeah, Armando. I didn't realize that was our friend.
Anyways, how nice.
So, yeah, it's hard to say, but I don't think there's going to be a lot of tension. I think there's going to be something there. But from what we're going to see in this next section, Jon is not the type to push for that. He doesn't want the throne. Yeah.
He just wants everyone to survive.
Yeah. And that's why, is a good segue to this next section, that's why if you think back to how he reacted when Dany was like, well, that means your claim is, you have a claim to the Iron Throne. And he's like, he looks confused in that moment. He's like, because in his mind, he's like, well, yeah, but that's not what I care about. What I care about is the fact that I'm banging my aunt now.
Yeah.
Right? Isn't
That is exactly what, that Kit Harington says, is that's what he's upset about. And then he becomes a little more upset because Dany isn't upset about the incest of it all and is upset about the throne stuff. And who cares about the throne? There's the dead are coming. We're related. I don't know who I'm sleeping with. That's where I feel his head's at.
And you're right about what you said earlier, that it has the kind of the effect of making Dany seem a little more petty because they needed to explain it. Sean pointed out on Monday, maybe they had Dany say that because it needed to be explained. You backed that up.
But I don't think it succeeded.
I think that's right.
Yeah, I don't think it really succeeded. Like, despite her laying it out there, they really, and despite us seeing Rhaegar Targaryen in a flashback, it's hard for people to grasp onto this character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's get y'all's takes on that.
No, I completely agree that that's a good reason to have Dany articulated, even though it makes her look like a little power focused. Maybe what we need is an entire flashback episode after the battle. Episode 4 is just Rhaegar. All Rhaegar.
All Rhaegar. Okay, I don't know about all Rhaegar, but like some Leon. If we got an actual flashback episode, like I think that would do the trick. I think that would be helpful, significant.
This would be very final season of Lost. But if we just we're on the drama in Westeros, let's just do Rhaegar and Lyanna. We get the trident, we get the tourney at Harrenhal, we get it all, we get everything. The book readers love it. The show watchers finally understand what we're talking about, and then we move to the end game. So
I guess to be fair to Dany, she's some people are wondering why she's not concerned about the incest. It's something that she grew up thinking she would marry her brother. It's kind of not as strange to her.
Experience, sure. But like the whole plot of season 1 hinges on Jaime and Cersei being terrified about their incest.
Yes.
So at least largely in Westeros, incest is frowned upon in this establishment. So for Daenerys, maybe not, but like Jon is not upset.
But still, like their aunt nephew, right? Not brother sister. So there's, I still feel like Jon, it shouldn't be quite that big of a deal for him.
Still pretty bad, but I agree, it's not as bad, but it's still pretty bad. Lady Gwyn, you had a thought here.
I think they're misdirecting by making Dany seem petty because of where I kind of think Dany's arc is going. I do think that a lot of this stuff that they're showing in her in her character that seems negative is largely misdirection. I mean, in the previous scene she declared her love for Jon, and we've seen her be sad about being alone in the world, the last Targaryen and all this stuff. So you'd think that she'd be very happy, or at least that she would react quite differently. On second and third watch of the episode, I watched her face very closely, and I felt like it reflected more kind of confusion than anger or defensiveness. Like she's trying to process this, what does this mean to our relationship kind of thing.
Yeah.
I don't think that there's a huge horror about the incest on her part, but she probably realizes that Jon might be a little disturbed. Maybe that's
I don't know if she does
ignoring her
that right
or
now.
avoiding her throughout the whole episode. So she's probably putting it all together, and she might be thinking that he's second guessing their relationship because of this.
And she can't read his mind, obviously. And like you said, she's under a lot of pressure. There's all these things are going really badly. They're facing death, and she's just been confronted by these really horrible childhood memories.
See, for me, the thing that's going to really matter is after she sees this fight here, this battle, is this war still Jon's war? Because I don't think it should be Jon's war for her, really, at this point, but certainly after things get to a certain point, at the point when, if she's sacrificing herself and all of that, I want to see her, really go all in on this, which you could assume if she's sacrificing herself, she is. But in that, and specifically, I'm talking about in that scene with Dany and Sansa, where she calls it Jon's war, and I was surprised that Dany, like, maybe at a certain point it was Jon's war, but I still think at this point Dany should be convinced, like, no, this is for survival. This is all of our war.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that.
Yeah, I think in that scene where it ended with the question that we didn't get an answer to, that the very next question was about the North, is if you're going to call this Jon's war, what is your answer about what happens to the North? Because it's either, if you want to have the North, then this is your war, not Jon's war.
It's like the Stannis thing. She's got to take responsibility for defending the realm if she wants to prove that she's worthy.
Exactly.
And she sort of did. I mean, she did come north. She's at this point, it's just only words. She has backed it up. Yeah. Also, to be fair, Jon had quite a while, at least a day or two to process his information, and Dany has got it just thrown in her face right there, right before the
And
battle.
when she calls it Jon's War, that can be Dany being a little manipulative of Sansa.
Okay. Yeah.
Like, she could still feel like, this is a war for survival, and still know that I can tell Sansa this is Jon's war and think that it might play better.
It might be a negotiating tactic, maybe. Yeah.
Maybe.
And it was interesting that they had the camera on her the whole time during the reveal. When Jon is speaking, you don't see Jon's face. It's all Dany's react, which is a cool way to do it because you get to see her face kind of change and as she realizes what's being said here. Another thing. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, something that Brian Cogman said that David Nutter, who directed this, has directed like so many great episodes of Game of Thrones. He directed, Reigns of Castamere, Mother's Mercy, like a bunch of like really great episodes. And the way he shoots is he shoots a ton of coverage, which means he just like shoots, which means like all different angles to catch everyone's reaction. And that's why like in the fireside chat scene, you have so many good reaction shots because he's like, okay, let's do it, but it's all Pod's face now, or let's do it and it's all this person's face. And so he has so much to work with in the edit in terms of like nuance and reaction.
That's awesome.
So,
that's very cool. Yeah. Speaking of processing, also for Dany, she hasn't gotten the chance, which is kind of a miss by the writers, maybe, that she hasn't gotten a chance to process the fact that her child is being ridden by the Night King and coming for them. So we have yet another possible quote-unquote Carsey. That's the thing now. We call it a Carsey moment when someone can't face this undead child of theirs, coming at them. That's a very specific reference there.
You did see that when Bran reminded her that the Night's King has her dragon in her face. You could see kind of shock on her face in that's last week.
Yeah, the conversation kind of moved on really quickly, but
but that was it.
And we also got, I brought it up in last week's episode, we got that scene where she's talking about the dragons don't like the North. And I brought it up then. I was like, the dragons are depressed. They lost their sibling. You lost your child. Like, of course they're not eating. But I would have thought that maybe in that scene would have been a perfect example for her to say it. Like, the dragons aren't eating. They don't like the North. And, Viserion's gone. It would have just been like a place to just like remind people.
Yeah. That's a good point. Okay. We had a couple of miscellaneous items left, but we'll probably just do you want to hit any of this, or should we just?
I don't think it's important. I'll give a shout out. Brendan Blackfish, he posted on Reddit a little breakdown of the Winterfell battle with an image and everything like that. So anyone who was wondering, the positioning of everything, you can find it easily on our ASOIF subreddit. And I thought, people have been asking me about the board. We really wanted to get into it in this episode, but we're just going to see on Sunday how things pan out. So
yeah. Did you put the image up?
I will put the image up now.
People at least see it. So you can see. Gives you something to talk about or think about it.
And you can look at the Reddit post for, that's the great thing about this fandom and really fandoms in general is that people can specialize so much. And so he can cover all this military stuff while we chillax.
And to just to say one more thing about it, Jeff is a military man himself, active duty, and he thinks that this stuff makes a lot of sense. Like the way they're arraying it is actually logical. So that's cool. That's good. So makes maybe encourage more people to dig into it, knowing that it's quality. All right. I know Joanna, you have to go in a second here, so let's get this wrapped up. Any other thoughts? Anyone?
Anyone at all? I guess I'll throw out there, just because I've had a couple of people ask me about it. People were wondering about Sansa's conversation with Bronzion Royce that Dany walks in on. They're just talking about their plans. They say the moment we can get the last infantrymen out onto the field, we should shut the gates. Keep them open for as long as you can. There are still people coming in from the countryside. And Joe Buckley, who helps us with our documents and all that, chimed in saying that he thinks this will be more important. These sort of decisions in the books.
If we remember, Ed Muir trying to feed everyone at River Run, and Brynden Tully was like, "Nah, you gotta. This is about survival, and we gotta kick out the mouths."
So I appreciate this shot of seeing Sansa like in a meeting. She's working all the time. She's I like, just even though it's brief.
There are so many Sansa talking to Jan Royce being interrupted moments so far this season, and I love that. I love it's just like Sansa and Jan are doing their business, and they're like, what now?
Yeah.
We're doing Winterfell business. Come on.
Also notable that she eats the same food everybody else is eating.
Yeah, she's eating there with Theon. They eat a nice meal together. Their last meal, potentially like their last meal, and stuff like that. Very meaningful.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think it's both. I don't think it's Sansa's last meal. She's living.
Yeah, I think Sansa's gonna be fine.
But I'm a little worried about Theon.
Theon,
We'll
not so
It
much.
was Theon's Last Supper.
Okay, well, thank you to all of our live watchers. Thank you for all the fantastic questions. Thank you for liking and sharing and supporting History of Westeros. And thank you to our wonderful guest, Lady Gwyn. Please tell everyone where to find Radio Westeros. We'll put that reminder in there every once in a while.
Oh, yeah, you can find us at radiowesteros.com, iTunes. We do have a Patreon. You can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, wherever. We're everywhere. Radio Westeros, and you'll find us wherever you find your stuff.
Cool. And Joanna Robinson, thank you so much for coming. It was awesome to have you. It's a very special thing to have you here. So please also tell everyone where to find.
I put in the description. I had put a link. I put Radio Westeros, radiowesteros.com. Joanna Robinson. I'm like, what do I link to? I just Twitter at Joe wrote this. They'll find it. There's too many things. So tell us. List off your titles.
You need a herald.
Yes, you do need a herald.
No. I will say that if we make it all through this pop culture apocalypse that is Avengers Endgame and Game of Thrones, Battle of Winterfell together, then we will consider ourselves victorious. So, yeah.
Well
Thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, cool. Thanks also to Michael Klarfeld of claradox.de for our maps and video intro.
And outro.
Yes. And our music care of Joey Townsend and Jesse Kowal. Writing help from Joe Buckley was present in this episode. And we'll see some of you at Ice and Fire Con.
Tomorrow. I gotta pack so much. It's I have panel tomorrow, pool party. It's gonna be lovely. I can't wait to see you all.
We'll be at 24 hours from now. We'll be in our panel.
Yeah, we will. Exactly. 24 hours. Lady Gwyn and I are on Good Guy Rhaegar. We'll be talking about Rhaegar and why he's good or not so good, or at least meh. I don't know.
Well, let me do a few patron. Oh, sorry.
I said, bring your opinions.
Yeah, bring your opinions, indeed. Well, let me do some patron shout-outs here as our end roll. Joanna, feel free. You don't have to. I know you have to go. So
Joanna, I know you had a hard out.
Okay.
6 minute pass.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Yeah. Bye. Okay. Thank you to patrons who make the show possible. We've been getting a lot of new support lately. We very, very much appreciate that. It is wind in our sails and food in our bellies and new microphones and things like that.
Oh, yeah.
The mysterious BR is our Hand of the King. The Smiling Wolf, Lord Stephen Stark of the Broken Tower, is soldier, scholar, philosopher, diplomat, and Hand of Queen Ashaya, who is known as the Best. Lord Jim the Fortuitous of Wars and Politics of Ice and Fire is Warden of the West. Lord George Stormsville the Cunning is Lord of the Chiliad and Warden of the East. Kabeth the Unfrozen is Lord of the Bricks and Castle Crimson Light, Defender of the Old Gods and Warden of the North. Lady Kelly McMath of Covington is Lady of the Villa Hills and Crescent Springs, Warden of the South. Lord James Tuttle is King of the Stepstones and the Narrow Sea, Commander of the Royal Fleet, consisting of the Narrow Fleet led by Flagship Caraxes, and the Bloodstone Fleet led by Flagship Prince Daemon. Our King Beyond the Wall, Sidney Jesse, is the Fallborn, Lord of Blue Spring and the Haunted Forest, wields a dagger of dragonglass and the Valyrian steel blade Red Frost. Our small council is Lord Daniel, the Sneaky Russian, Master of Ships, Grand Maester Via James, Lord Benjen of House Hornwood, Master of Laws, Lord Fabian Flowers, the Bastard of Greenshield, Master of Coin, Lord Johann of House Orcos, called Shadowhawk, is Master of Whisperers. Lady Direliz of Castle Naki is the Alpha Patron. Lord Dan of the Red Mountains and Castle Great Bell is Breaker of the Second Stone. Lord Skip of the Veldt is Lord of Castle Ganges. Alicia Everlasting is of the Green Blood, Lady of Desert Rose. Gregor the Toasty is Lord of the Breadfort. Lord Ryan of Castle Stonegate is Guardian of the Rocky Mountain Pass. Lord Garin de Haviland is of Devil's Hand Keep. Ashlyn Winter the Hawkseye is Lady of Castle Skyfall. Lady Mikkel of Moonacre is leader of the Werewood Protectorate Alliance. The Lord of the Halls of Castle Hillcrest is wielder of the Valyrian Steel Machete Everglazed. Lord Alistair Whitaker is Lord of the Dawnhold. Lord Bemmy Snugglebunny is Guardian Ranger of the Hidden 100-Acre Werewood. Brian the Defender is Lord of the Spearfort and the Freelands, last scion of Clan McCulloch. The Bastard of the Wolfswood is First Forester of the Old Gods. Connor the Dungeon Master is Lord of Catamount Keep and Guardian of the Smoky Mountain Pass. Lady Baelish is Dark Widow of Harrenhal. Nevessa the Twin-Hearted is suspected skin changer, holder of Castle Carahelm. Sir Valentin of House of Jen is creator of the Game of Predictions, free Game of Thrones futures market. Lady Lana Kelly of Wolf Island is protectress of the Steelhold. Casey Stark is of House Acres. Lady Kay of House Archer is Lady of Earthdog Hall, Huntress of the Wolfswood, and Guardian of Maddie Squirrelsbane, the Mighty Direweenie. Lady Raywin of House Dillsdane is the Star Spear. Peter Rivers, the Pale Dragon, is the Pale Dragon and heir to Bloodraven. Our King's Justice is Sir Troy the Steady, wielder of the Valyrian Steel Blade Fate.
The Queen's High Council has Bloody Ben Blackwood, Master of Whisperers, Rebea Stareyes, Lady of Waves and Mistress of Ships, Captain of the Iron Shadow Cat. In the shadows we bear our claws. Grandmaster Elizabeth, middle daughter of Lyanna Mormont, First Lady to forge both the Silver and Valyrian Steel Link. Deniz of Lazar, Embar Perazis, former head of the Cell Company, the Fiery Shepherds, Master of Laws, and I have a Master of Coin too, Laura of House Brondos.
That's right. And in fact, Deniz of Lazar is now a Sea Lord. He has jumped ship, so to speak, from Master of Laws to a Sea Lord, and he is, in fact, turning on you guys. He wants to take Rebea's job.
Oh, I don't know if I should allow this sort of thing.
Things are getting interesting.
It seems like people should be chiller in the High Council, not be into that.
He's a different kind of guy, this Deniz of Lazar. Kingsguard is led by Lord Commander Miriam R. and backed up by Sir Dolorous D., longest tenured White Sword. Willa Crowsbane is Guardian of White Tree, First Lady of the Free Folk. Sir Dean the White is Knight of the Black Star. Sir Jord of House Pepsi is the Beverage Knight. Gregor Snow is called Snow Bear, a bastard of Winterfell.
The Queen's Guard is led by Lord Captain Commander Jaime Helmont, the Sellsword Sentinel. Has Alexander of House Atreides from the Seat of Dune, I Must Not Fear, Fear is the Mind Killer, Becca the Bard, Songbird of the North, Michonne the Melodious, Star of Old Town, Minds Over Masters, Ser Rambo, Knight of House Gannon, First Blood, Ser Leon of House Walker, wielder of the twin Valyrian steel blades, Fire and Ice, and the Werewood bow, Rain, along with Amber the Adamant, the Knight of the Mist, and Mother of Squids.
Mm-hmm. And also thank you to, last but not least, our History of Westeros Night's Watch, which is led by Lord Commander Benjen Umber, the Silent Giant, wielder of the Valyrian Steel Greatsword, Winter's Kiss, First Builder Maegor Snow, a.k.a. Maegor the Cool, the Fire and the Snow, First Steward Sir Jurion of the Torrentide, called Pale Wind, and First Ranger Sir Source Delica of House Gramercy. Very, very good, everybody. Thank you very much. Thank you again to Ashaya. Thank you again to Joanna and Lady Gwyn and everybody else. We will see you guys soon after a huge battle. What is going to be the longest ever episode of Game of Thrones is this Sunday, so enjoy it. Also, a reminder that we will not be doing a Saturday episode because we will be at Ice FireCon, but we will be releasing an episode on Saturday, so you'll get something from us.
And an extra shout out to Lady Gwyn for sitting through the Patreon credits when she didn't technically have to.
Yes, thanks, Lady
We did
Gwyn.
not release her, and she's had to sit here.
We get to talk to her afterwards offline, and the rest of you can be jealous about that.
Okay.
All right, Valar, reread us, everyone.